Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again?
Hey guys, this is VGTI. I didn't expect to be talking about Half-Life again this soon, but in comes Valve like a headcrab missile to tell me, hey, no, wait, let's slow down for a second. Yes, it's true. A new Half-Life game has been announced by Valve. Yeah, I had to check whether I was alive too. You'll quickly notice the new game is not Half-Life 3 or Half-Life 2 Episode 3, but rather a prequel going by the name of HalfLife Alyx. Give you two guesses who it focuses on. So, what do we know about Half-Life Alyx? According to Valve, it's a prequel set between the events of Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2, around the time when Eli is mounting the resistance movement and Gordon is, still sleeping. The description of the plot on the game's Steam page is pretty general, discussing Alyx and Eli and their growing struggle against the Combine. What's most important to note about this game, however, is that it's exclusive to virtual reality. You'll need a VR headset to play, and some of this gameplay was shown in the trailer Valve put out for it. My hope is that the game does eventually get a non-VR version of itself so that more people can play it, but for now, Valve seems pretty intent on the idea that the game needed to be VR. Considering HL2 was pretty boundary breaking in its own right, and HL1 before it, HL Alyx going VR seems natural, even if it does narrow the participation a bit. 2 months ago, I made a Half-Life Theory video discussing Alyx Vance. At the time, I thought, well, that's it. There's not much more I can dig into with Half-Life. But now, with the announcement of Half-Life Alyx and the trailer to go along with it, we have it. A theory, ladies and gentlemen. Despite Valve stating that HL Alyx is a prequel, I don't think that's the entire truth. The game is a prequel, yes, but from what the trailer shows us, there's more going on. My theory is this: HL Alyx will provide more setup for the plot of Half-Life 3. Before you continue watching this video, I recommend hopping back over to the aforementioned Alyx Theory video I put out. Give that a watch because it will be connected to the ideas that I present here. Good? Great. In that video, I put forward the idea that Alyx Vance is a key player to the G-Man and his plans. Essentially, Gordon Freeman stopped being the G-Man's prize contract once the Vortigaunts helped free him at the end of HL2. From Episode 1 onwards, G-Man took a renewed interest in Alyx Vance. He was ready to have her die in the Citadel explosion, but that was before the Vorts interfered. Thanks to their abilities, they can interfere with the G-Man's powers without him knowing ahead of time. Gordon being saved changed the timeline for the G-Man, and this new timeline has one key player who will be vital to stopping the Combine, Alyx Vance. Fast forward to Mark Laidlaw's Episode 3 fanfic, the ending of which has G-Man saving Alyx and leaving Gordon for dead. The rest practically writes itself. So what's the deal with Half-Life Alyx? I know I'm not the only one who noticed the weird, out-of-place things in the trailer. First and foremost, Eli's quote. Early on in the trailer, we hear Eli Vance state, "Close your eyes, honey." And as all of us remember, these are Eli's last few words before his death by Advisor at the end of Episode 2. But hang on a second. Half-Life Alyx takes place between HL1 and 2. So why are we hearing these lines? Some have presented the idea that Eli will say these exact words at some point in HL Alyx, being nothing more than a morbid reference to the ending of the series. However, I think it's something more. That line, to me, seems to hint that we're going to go back to the events of Episode 2. The majority of HL Alyx's plot will likely be rooted firmly in prequel territory, but I have a feeling the ending will set up HL3 in some fashion, and this includes bringing us back to the events of Episode 2's ending. And that brings us to the other big weird part of the trailer, the G-Man. Yeah, not only do we get to see the G-Man, we get to see him as he looks in a 2020 game, voiced by good old Michael Shapiro too. Well, Half-Life, G-Man, it's all business as usual, I guess. Can't wait to play. Hey, wait a minute. Half-Life Alyx is a game where we play solely as Alyx Vance. The game takes place from her perspective, not Gordon's. So why is the G-Man there? There are a few different possibilities. While it's true that G-Man does appear to multiple people throughout Half-Life, we're trying to keep in line with the other theories I presented. According to my last HL video, G-Man took no further interest in Alyx until the end of HL2, so for him to appear to her during the events of HL Alyx would be out of place. For all we know, he shouldn't be interested in Alyx at this point. However, just like Eli's out-of-place lines earlier in the trailer, the appearance of the G-Man leads me to believe even more that we will be getting some sort of setup for HL3's story. HL2's ending confirms this for us, as he pretty clearly has no interest in saving Alyx by that point in time. It's not out of the question that he spoke to her before that point, however. G-Man gets around, I guess you could say. We know he's always watching everyone, relaying information, making contracts. It's possible he could have contacted Alyx before HL2, and considering Alyx's weird trance-like state she gets in with the G-Man, it's very likely she doesn't remember this meeting once Gordon strolls on in. That's all just theoretical though. It could be a pre-HL2 meeting, or it could hint at the future of the series. What's more, Half-Life Alyx focusing entirely on Alyx seems to confirm the idea that she's going to be a more central character in future Half-Life games, if there are any. It seems to me like Valve is in kind of a weird place with the Half-Life series. Up until this point, I'd firmly given up belief that they were going to continue it. HL Alyx proves that wrong. This isn't just some spin-off game that has nothing to do with Half-Life's main plot. HL Alyx is a definite part of the story, with Valve even going so far as to confirm when specifically it takes place in the timeline. So, let's do the math. You're a company that hasn't put out a new game for your popular single-player FPS series in over a decade. All of a sudden, virtual reality is here. You invest the money and resources to make a brand new Half-Life game, no mere spin-off, as a VR exclusive title to be released in 2020. All of this seems to indicate that Valve is still interested in doing stuff with Half-Life. They wouldn't add more to the story if they weren't, right? Valve surprisingly did have something to say on HL3, however. In a recent video put out by the Game Awards' very own Jeff Keighley, Keighley sits down and has a chat with various members of Valve about Half-Life's return. It's a good watch, but one part in particular gets into the topic of Half-Life 3. Valve's Robin Walker had this to say.
I'm sure the question, of course, will come up. You wouldn't even say it, but like Half-Life 3, I'm sure some people are like, why is this not Half-Life 3? Why is this a prequel? So can you sort of explain like timeline, how that all kind of came together? Because you said, let's do Half-Life, but it's like, just carry it forward, guys.
Yeah, I think Robin is the perfect person to answer this question.
Time to leave.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, back in 2016 when we started this, I mean, Half-Life was just a terrifying, Half-Life 3, terrifyingly daunting prospect, right? And I think to some extent, VR was a way we could fool ourselves into believing we could, we had a way to do this. Because by starting with VR and then trying to think about Half-Life and how it worked with it and playtesting those, you're immediately in a space where we have something we understand well, Half-Life's core gameplay, and a new platform with new prospects and new possibilities, and we can do that translation, and then we can watch people play it. And so within a week or two, we're starting to learn. We're able to watch someone go through it. And so it was really easy to not try and think about the big picture of like, we're making Half-Life 3 and just focus on, let's figure out what people enjoy in this, and let's make forward progress. And in some ways, like VR was a little bit, like the way the gravity gun helped us in Half-Life 2, where that became the tent pole that you could wrap so much around.
That innovation around it.
Exactly. And so VR became this thing that we could wrap everything around.
Kind of like a rail to slide along for design,
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair.
Whereas Half-Life 3, if it's like, hey, tomorrow you're working on Half-Life 3, you're like, oh God.
No, and they said the expectation.
To sum all of Walker's statement up, a new Half-Life game in VR is basically a safer play for Valve to test the waters. I think we all know how much Half-Life 3 has been built up. Trying to release it to everybody's expectations is nigh on impossible. While HL3 isn't out of the question for Valve, a new game in VR lets them experiment with Half-Life gameplay in a new setting, presented to the world at large. VR is the focus this time around, similar to how the gravity gun was this new and awesome weapon that controlled objects in a way not seen before in games, how that was a big focus of Half-Life 2 and its episodes. It also likely means that if we do someday get a proper Half-Life 3, it's going to be in VR. You thought you felt like Gordon before? What better way to immerse than VR? As Half-Life Alyx gets closer to release, we'll likely find out more, especially once the game actually does come out. Whatever the case, it looks like we're nowhere near done with the Half-Life theories just yet. Considering I was just a high schooler when I first played Half-Life 2 and its episodes, we've come a long way to get to this point. I'm just happy for more Half-Life, from any and all places. Half-Life Alyx is a prequel, to be sure, but it also appears to be so much more under the surface. Not just with the weird things in the trailer, but also with what it means that Valve is doing this in the first place. Half-Life is back, and yes, it's really that time again, Dr. Freeman. So, what do you guys think about Half-Life Alyx? Do you think it's going to be exclusively a prequel, or do you think it will expand into the future of Half-Life as a whole? My money is on the latter, although I guess I'm going to need to start saving for a VR headset, huh? Anyway, that's it for me today, guys. Whatever the case may be with this theory, one thing's for sure, I'll be keeping a close eye on Half-Life Alyx. Want to stay up with the channel and all of these random fits of speculation? Go ahead and subscribe, and thank you so much to all of you who already are. You can also keep up with VGTI on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
In the meantime, this is where I get off.